In the vast, silent desert, the fiercest storms are not of sand and wind, but those that rage within the human heart. The land only reveals what we truly are. The Arizona sun was a merciless hammer, beating down upon the scorched earth. Nakoni, an Apache warrior on a solitary vision quest, scanned the horizon. His eyes, sharp and accustomed to the shimmering heat, caught a flicker of something unnatural against the red rocks. It was a stillness where there should be life. He moved toward it, his moccasins making no sound on the parched ground. The air was thick, with the scent of dust and the silence of a land that did not forgive weakness. He was seeking guidance from the spirits, a way to quiet the grief that had shadowed his heart for 3 long winters. But the spirits, it seemed, had a different path for him today. A path that led to a scene of brutal finality. He found the dead horse first, its body already drawing flies. A short distance away, a woman lay sprawled in the dust. Her fair hair was a tangled mess, matted with dirt and dried blood. Nakoni approached with the caution of a wolf, his hand resting lightly on the knife at his belt. Her dress was torn, and the dark bruises on her skin were a stark testament to a violent struggle. Her breathing was a shallow whisper, a fragile thread about to snap. He saw the tracks of a single horse leading away, the prints deep and hurried. Whoever had left her here had done so with a cold heart, leaving her for the sun and the scavengers to claim. He knew he could not leave her to that fate. Gently he knelt beside her. He saw the faint flutter of her pulse in the delicate skin of her throat. She was alive, but barely. He understood the language of violence well enough to read the story written on her body. She had fled from a monster, and the desert had almost become her final cage. A deep anger stirred within him, a cold fire against the man who could do this. Without a second thought, he gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, a fragile bird with broken wings. Her head rested against his chest, a silent weight of trust she was not even aware she was giving. He could not let her perish under this unforgiving sky. He carried her away from the grim scene, his steps sure and steady despite his burden. The sun beat down on his bare shoulders, but he did not feel it. His focus was entirely on the woman in his arms. He needed to find shelter, water, and a place where the ghosts of her past could not reach her. His own quest for a vision was forgotten, replaced by a more immediate and tangible purpose. He was a warrior, a protector. And this woman, a stranger from another world, was now under his care. He would not fail her. The vast, silent desert stretched before them, but it no longer felt empty. It held a life he was determined to save. His people's main encampment was too far, a journey the woman would not survive in her weakened state. But Nakoni knew of a place, a secret held close by the elders of his tribe. It was a sacred cave, nestled deep within a winding canyon, a place of power and healing. He carried her toward it, the canyon walls rising around them like ancient sentinels. The air grew cooler as they descended into the shadows, a welcome relief from the relentless sun. This cave was where warriors came to cleanse their spirits, to listen to the whispers of the earth. Now it would serve as a sanctuary for a life trembling on the brink of darkness. Inside, the cave was cool and dark. A small opening high above let in a single shaft of light, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He gently laid her down on a bed of soft, dry grasses he gathered from a hidden alcove. Her body was limp, her face pale and still. He moved with quiet efficiency, his actions born of a deep knowledge passed down through generations. From his pouch he took dried yucca leaves, chewing them into a poultice to place on her worst wounds. He knew its power to draw out fever and soothe the angry, broken skin. He worked in silence, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man whose hands were accustomed to the bow and the knife. For the next few days he became her silent guardian. He hunted small game near the canyon rim, bringing back rabbits and quail to make a thin, nourishing broth. He fetched water from a hidden spring that trickled from the rock face deep within the cave system, the water pure and cold. He would leave the food and water near her, then retreat to the mouth of the cave. He sat there for hours, a stoic figure watching the entrance, ensuring no harm would come to her while she healed. He gave her the gift of space and silence, understanding that some wounds needed to heal from the inside out. Far from the prying eyes of the world, he tended a small, smokeless fire, its warmth keeping the night chill at bay. The flickering light cast long shadows on the cave walls, dancing over ancient paintings of hunts and spirits. He would watch her as she slept, her face slowly losing its deathly pallor. He saw the fine lines of her features, the curve of her lips, the sweep of her lashes against her cheek. He wondered what life she had known, what sorrows had led her to this desolate place. In the quiet solitude of the cave, he felt a strange connection to her, a sense of responsibility that went beyond mere duty. He was not just saving a life, he was guarding a spirit. Ilara awoke to shadows and the scent of wood smoke. Her first coherent thought was not of pain, but of a deep, primal fear. A figure sat silhouetted against the light of the cave mouth. An Indian. Everything she had ever been taught, every whispered story and fearful warning screamed at her to run. His face was severe, etched with lines of experience she could not comprehend, and his dark eyes held a profound, unsettling wisdom. She tried to push herself away, to scramble back into the darkness, but her body was a leaden weight, refusing to obey the frantic commands of her mind. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and the cave seemed to spin. Nokoni saw the terror in her eyes the moment they opened. He had seen that look before in cornered animals. He did not move, did not speak. He simply held her gaze for a long moment, letting her see that he meant her no harm. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he rose and stepped back, melting into the shadows near the cave wall. He was giving her space, a silent offering of peace. He understood that his presence was a source of her fear, a fear ingrained in her by her people. He would have to earn her trust, one small, patient gesture at a time. He would wait. The desert had taught him the virtue of patience. He left a bowl of warm broth and a canteen of fresh water on a flat rock near her sleeping place. Then he walked to the entrance of the cave and sat down, his back to her, looking out at the sunlit canyon. He became a guardian at the gate, a silent protector. He wanted her to understand that she was not a prisoner. The cave was a shelter, not a cage. He heard her stir behind him, the faint rustle of the grass bed. He did not turn. He remained perfectly still, a statue of calm resolve. He knew that any sudden movement, any perceived threat, would shatter the fragile peace he was trying to build between them. Later, when the sun began to dip below the canyon rim, he spoke, his voice low and calm. He used the broken English he had learned from traders and soldiers over the years. "You are safe here," he said without looking at her. "No one will harm you." The words hung in the quiet air of the cave. He did not know if she understood, or if she even believed him. But the words needed to be said. He was offering her a promise, a shield against the world that had hurt her. He knew her wounds were more than just bruises and cuts. They were deep in her soul, and those were the wounds that took the longest to heal. Days bled into one another. Ilara's strength slowly returned. The sharp edges of her pain dulled to a persistent ache. She watched her rescuer from the safety of her bed. He never intruded, never demanded anything of her. His presence was a constant, quiet rhythm in her new life. He would hunt, tend the fire, and sit his silent vigil at the cave entrance. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke of a deep, unwavering kindness. She began to see not the savage from her husband's hateful descriptions, but a man of honor and quiet dignity. The fear that had held her in its icy grip began to recede, replaced by a tentative curiosity. One evening, as the fire crackled softly, he sat across from her, carving a small piece of cottonwood with his knife. The shavings fell into the fire, glowing brightly for a moment before turning to ash. He worked with intense focus, his long fingers moving with practiced skill. When he was finished, he held it out to her. It was a small, intricately carved figure of a hawk, its wings outstretched, as if in flight. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took it. The wood was smooth and warm in her hand. It was a simple gift, an offering of peace. For the first time since her escape, a genuine smile touched Ilara's lips. Meanwhile, miles away in the dusty town of Redemption, a different kind of fire was burning. Bart Corrigan, owner of the prosperous Silver Creek mine, paced his opulent office like a caged beast. His rage was a palpable force in the room. His property had been stolen. He saw Ilara not as a wife, but as a possession, a beautiful ornament that reflected his own status and power. Her defiance was an insult he could not bear. He had already spun his tale to the townsfolk, a story of a loving husband whose delicate wife had been viciously abducted by heathen savages during a ride. The lie was easy for most to believe. "Find her," Corrigan snarled, slamming his fist on the heavy oak desk. Across from him, a man named Caleb nodded slowly, his cold eyes missing nothing. Caleb was a tracker, a man who knew the desert better than he knew himself. He was relentless, amoral, and brutally efficient. "She cannot have gone far," Caleb said, his voice a dry rasp. "The desert does not suffer fools. I will find her tracks." Corrigan tossed a heavy bag of coins onto the desk. "There is more when you bring her back. I do not care what you have to do to those savages who took her. Just bring me back what is mine." Caleb picked up the bag, his lips twisting into a cruel smile. The chill of the desert night settled around the small fire in the cave. The hawk carving rested in Alara's lap, a silent token of the fragile trust growing between them. Tonight, the silence felt different, less a barrier and more a shared space. Using a combination of gestures and the few English words she knew he understood, she began to tell her story. She spoke of a fine house that was a prison, of a husband whose touch was always cold, whose words were always sharp. She did not need many words to convey the years of fear, the constant threat of his temper, the suffocating loneliness of her life with Bart Corrigan. Nokoni listened without interruption, his dark eyes fixed on her face. He saw the pain flicker in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she spoke. He understood. He had seen the cruelty of his own people, but the cold, calculated cruelty she described was a different kind of poison. When she fell silent, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. He then picked up a stick and drew a simple picture in the dirt floor of the cave. A man, a woman, and a small child. He pointed to the woman and child, then drew a line through them. He looked at Alara, his own grief, a raw, open wound in his eyes. "Sickness," he said, the single word heavy with loss. "From your people." He did not say it with anger, but with a profound, aching sadness. He told her of his wife, Mourning Dove, and his young son, Little Bear. They had been taken by a fever that swept through his village 2 winters past, a disease for which his people's medicine had no answer. He had been left alone with a heart full of ghosts. In that moment, they were not an Apache warrior and a woman from a different world. They were 2 souls, bound by a shared understanding of loss, 2 people who had seen the darkness that life could hold. Their shared vulnerability created a bond deeper than words. He began to teach her things, small rituals of his life. He showed her how to find water, how to read the signs of the animals. One clear night, he led her to the mouth of the cave and pointed to the star-dusted sky. He spoke the Apache names for the constellations, his voice a low murmur in the vast silence. She listened, mesmerized. In the quiet intimacy of the cave, something new and delicate was taking root in the barren soil of their grief. It was more than gratitude, more than friendship. It was a tender shoot of hope, a feeling neither of them had expected to ever feel again. Caleb was a ghost in the wilderness. He moved with a purpose that bordered on obsession, his eyes missing no detail. He found the dead horse, the faint tracks leading away from the site. He noted the single set of moccasin prints alongside the impressions left by the woman being carried. One man, an Apache, by the style of the moccasin. Caleb smiled. This was a hunt, and he was the predator. He followed the trail with an unnerving patience, unraveling the story of their journey from the broken twigs and disturbed stones they left behind. He was a craftsman of pursuit, and he was closing in on his quarry with methodical certainty. Nokoni felt the change in the wind, a prickling on his skin, a sense of being watched that had kept him alive through many battles. He knew they could not stay in the cave any longer. It was a sanctuary, but it was also a trap. He had to lead Alara to his people, to the safety of the main encampment hidden deep within the canyon of Whispering Winds. "We must go," he told her, his voice urgent. He saw the fear return to her eyes, but it was mingled with a new resolve. She nodded, her trust in him now stronger than her fear of the unknown. The journey would be perilous, but staying meant certain capture. They traveled by night, moving through the labyrinthine canyons under the cold light of the moon. Nokoni moved with a silent grace, choosing paths that would leave the faintest of trails. Ilara, though still weak, followed without complaint. Her will to survive, to remain free, was a fire that burned brighter with each step she took away from her old life. He taught her how to walk silently, how to use the shadows as a cloak. During the day, they would hide in narrow crevices or beneath rocky overhangs, sleeping in shifts, always listening, always vigilant for any sign of pursuit. One moonless night, as they crossed a wide, sandy wash, Nokoni suddenly stopped. He pulled Ilara down behind a cluster of boulders, his hand signaling for silence. Moments later, a lone figure on horseback appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. It was Caleb. He sat there for a long time, surveying the wash below, his head turning slowly as he scanned for any sign of movement. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. They were so close. The air was thick with tension. Finally, Caleb urged his horse forward, disappearing over the ridge. They had escaped detection, but the close call was a grim reminder. The shadow of their pursuer was long, and it was falling ever closer. The entrance to the Canyon of Whispering Winds was a narrow slit in the rock, almost invisible to the untrained eye. Inside, the canyon opened into a wide, fertile valley, a hidden world of green grass and a clear, running stream. Tipis dotted the valley floor, smoke curling lazily into the morning air. This was Nokoni's home. As they entered the village, a hush fell over the people. All eyes turned to the woman at Nokoni's side. Her pale skin and fair hair marked her as an outsider, a source of both curiosity and suspicion. Children peeked from behind their mothers' buckskin dresses, their dark eyes wide with wonder. The tribe's chief, a wise old man named Geronimo, listened intently as Nokoni recounted his story. Beside him sat Ona, the tribe's healer, her face a mask of wrinkles that spoke of a long life filled with both sorrow and wisdom. Ona looked at Ilara, her gaze penetrating, seeming to see the wounds that lay hidden beneath the surface. She nodded slowly. "She has the spirit of a fighter," Ona said in the Apache tongue. "She may stay." But not all were so welcoming. Another warrior, Tarak, stepped forward, his face a thundercloud of disapproval. He was a powerful warrior, respected for his bravery, but known for his hot temper. "You bring this woman here, Nokoni?" Tarak's voice was sharp with accusation. "You bring the white man's trouble into our home? Her people hunt us, they take our lands, and you bring one of them to live among us?" He looked at Ilara with open hostility. "Your grief has made you weak. This woman will be our undoing." Nokoni stood firm, his gaze unwavering. "She is under my protection. Her heart is not like those who hunt us. I will not turn her away." The tension between the two warriors was a palpable thing, a rift in the unity of the tribe. The chief raised a hand, silencing them both. "The woman stays. Tarak, you will hold your tongue." Ona took Ilara under her wing. She gave her a place in her own teepee and began to teach her the ways of the Apache women. She showed her how to grind corn, how to sew with sinew and bone needles, how to find the healing plants that grew in the canyon. Ilara learned quickly, her hands eager to be useful, her mind hungry for this new knowledge. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging, of being part of a community. The women of the tribe, initially wary, began to accept her, their smiles, and shared laughter a balm to her wounded spirit. She was finding a home in the most unexpected of places. The peace of the canyon was shattered by the arrival of a dust cloud at its entrance. Bart Corrigan had found them. He rode at the head of a dozen armed men, a posse of hired guns and grim-faced miners. Beside him rode Caleb, his eyes scanning the canyon walls with cold appraisal. With them was Sheriff Miller from Redemption, a man whose weary face showed he wished he were anywhere else. He was a man of the law, and the law stated that a wife was her husband's property. His presence gave Corrigan's posse a veneer of legitimacy, but Miller's heart was not in it. He had seen Corrigan's cruelty firsthand. Corrigan was no fool. He knew that to enter the narrow canyon would be suicide. The Apache warriors would pick them off from the cliffs with ease. Instead, he halted his men at the entrance, his voice echoing off the rock walls. "I know you are in there, you heathens. You have something that belongs to me. Send out my wife Ilara, and I will let you live in peace." His words were laced with arrogance and venom. "If you refuse, I will ride to the fort. I will bring back the cavalry, and we will burn this entire canyon to the ground. You have until sundown." The threat hung in the air, a promise of fire and death. A council was held in the chief's teepee. The mood was grim. Tarak argued for war. "We should not negotiate with these men. We should attack now, drive them away before they can bring the soldiers." But the chief was older and wiser. "To attack is to give them the excuse they need to bring the army. We will lose our home." Nokoni listened in silence, his heart heavy. He knew this was his fault. He had brought this danger to his people. He looked at Ilara, who sat beside Ona, her face pale but her eyes filled with a fierce resolve. She had not spoken, but he knew what she was thinking. Nokoni rose. "I will go and speak with him." He walked to the canyon entrance, his stride long and confident. The Apache warriors took up positions on the cliffs above, their rifles ready. As Nokoni stepped out into the sunlight, another figure appeared at his side. It was Ilara. She had refused to stay behind. She stood tall, her head held high, facing the man who had been the source of all her misery. Her voice, when she spoke, did not tremble. It rang out, clear and strong, across the space between them. "I am not your property, Bart. I will not go with you. I have made my choice. This is my home now." Corrigan's face contorted in a mask of pure fury. Ilara's public defiance was the ultimate humiliation. "Then you will die with them," he screamed, his control finally snapping. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot went wide, but it was the spark that ignited the powder keg. The canyon erupted in a cacophony of gunfire. Corrigan's men charged forward, firing wildly, while the Apache warriors answered from the cliffs above, their shots precise and deadly. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the shouts of men. Nokoni pulled Ilara back into the cover of the rocks, his own rifle now in his hands. In the chaos of the battle, Tarak saw Nokoni pinned down by two of Corrigan's men. For a moment he hesitated, his old resentment warring with his duty as a warrior. Then he saw the fierce determination with which Nokoni fought, not just for himself, but for the woman who stood behind him. In that instant, Tarak's animosity vanished, replaced by a grudging respect. He raised his rifle and fired, taking down one of the men who threatened Nokoni. He had made his choice. They were all Apache, and they would stand together against this common enemy. Caleb, ever the opportunist, saw his chance. While the others were engaged in the firefight, he slipped through the rocks, trying to circle around and grab Ilara. He lunged for her, his hand closing on her arm. But this was not the same terrified woman he had tracked through the desert. A fire of defiance burned in her eyes. She grabbed a heavy stone from the ground and brought it down hard on his hand. Caleb cried out in pain, his grip loosening for just a second. It was all the time she needed. She scrambled away, back toward the safety of the other warriors. Caleb stared at his bleeding hand in disbelief, then retreated back into the chaos. The battle culminated in a final, desperate confrontation. Nokoni faced Bart Corrigan on a narrow ledge. It was a clash of two worlds, two ideologies. Corrigan fought with the blind rage of a man whose power had been challenged, while Nokoni fought with the calm, deadly focus of a warrior protecting his home and his love. In his fury, Corrigan lunged recklessly. He lost his footing on the loose gravel of the ledge. For a heart-stopping moment he teetered on the edge, his eyes wide with terror. Then, with a final scream, he fell into the canyon below. His death broke the spirit of his men. They fled, leaving their dead behind. The battle was over. Silence descended upon the canyon, broken only by the whisper of the wind. The threat was gone. Sheriff Miller, who had witnessed the entire battle from a safe distance, slowly rode forward. He looked at the scene, at the fallen men, at the resolute faces of the Apache warriors. He looked at Ilara, standing proudly beside Nokoni. He tipped his hat. "Seems to me," he said quietly. "Justice was served here today." He turned his horse and rode away, knowing he would report that Corrigan and his men had been killed in a dispute of their own making. The matter was closed. In the days that followed, a new sense of peace settled over the village. Tarek approached Nokoni, his face somber. "You were right, my brother," he said, placing a hand on Nokoni's shoulder. "Her spirit is as strong as any Apache. You have chosen well." The rift between them was healed, and the tribe was once again united. Ilara was no longer seen as an outsider, but as one of their own, a woman who had faced death and chosen to stand with them. She had earned her place not through birth, but through courage and loyalty. Months passed. The harsh summer gave way to the cool, golden days of autumn. The hills of Arizona were painted in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. Ilara had found her life here. She moved with a grace and confidence she had never known. She laughed with the women, played with the children, and learned the ancient stories of the people who had taken her in. She had found not just a sanctuary but a family. Her past was a distant ghost, a scar that had faded into a reminder of the strength she had discovered within herself. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of glory, Nokoni led her to the top of the highest cliff overlooking the canyon. The world stretched out below them, vast and beautiful. He did not speak, but took a necklace from around his own neck. It was a simple leather cord, strung with polished stones of brilliant blue turquoise. He placed it gently around her neck. It was not a proposal in the way her people would understand it, but it was a promise, a symbol of a bond that transcended words and customs. It was a union of two hearts, two souls from different worlds who had found their home in each other.